Hey everyone, welcome to Author Nation. Today we're diving into expressing yourself through words as an artist. I'm your host, Melody Ann, and I'm here to guide you towards actionable insights and strategies that'll help you write with purpose, but also connect with your readers, because that's what you really want to do. At Author Nation, we always equip you with the resources you need. So go check out authornation.online and you will find a library of resources that you need right now. So whether you're sipping your morning coffee or winding down after a long day, or like my guest on the road, settle in. And talking about guests, let me introduce him. From the Southern United States, Leslee Hall is a former athlete turned pro musician with a degree and background in corporate finance. He's made his living and his way across the United States musically via various bars, clubs, restaurants, and theaters. From the elevation of those stages, he's been gifted with an extended gaze into the human condition, the best and the worst of it. In his darkest season of his own life, he found a trail to inner peace, to true freedom, and turned his curse into blessings. Tracking Our Inner Animal, his book, is his attempt to share that blessing. Let's welcome Leslee. Hey, Leslee, how are you
How are we
today?
doing? I'm doing just
Good.
fine. I'm
Oh,
burning up the
wonderful.
highways, but headed home
Yeah.
for the
Well,
holidays.
you're always on the road, aren't you? Right?
It's
This
a
is what
very
you do.
frequent thing in my world, yes. Very
Exactly.
frequent.
So tell first thing, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, what kind of music are you playing, and then what inspired you to write this book?
Well, I am really a rock and roll guy, but I come from the Gulf Coast of Alabama, way down in the southern tip, and for me, it was moving to Nashville once upon a time. So I kind of got immersed into the country music world. I'm currently on the road with a country music friend of mine, helping him handle his business. An artist named Larry Fleet, and we've been in 14 countries this year, and all over the United States. And I'm very happy to be headed home for the holidays, and I get to stay in one place for a little bit and
Yeah.
sleep at 0 miles an hour. That's always a nice thing. So I couldn't be more
Yeah.
excited about it right now.
Yeah, that's good. It's always, you know what? Traveling is wonderful, and there's nothing like coming home. That's what I
Absolutely.
always say. That's how I
This
feel
is
whenever I travel.
most
Yeah.
definitely my home is in Alabama. It's where all my
Yeah.
family is and where I
Yeah.
grew up, and all my playground. I have a bunch of beaches and swamps and bays and rivers and stuff. So I get to get home and kind of recenter myself before we take off again next year. So,
That sounds brilliant. So what inspired you to write a book?
well, I've, for whatever reason, I've been kind of a lighthouse for a lot of my friends and family. When things aren't going their way, they come talk to me, and we kind of sort it out. Um, and that led to being very frustrated about figuring out what might be the right thing to do, and then having them not do it, to do the thing that felt the right thing to do, do the path of least resistance type of stuff.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't until I kind of fell into my own trouble. uh, I moved to Nashville in 2012, and with the girl that I thought I was going to marry, and that didn't work out. Uh, and that led me to, I believed that it should. I believed once you found your mate, you made it work. That was the example that I'd seen, but that wasn't the case. And so that was the little schism in my own belief system that made me think, what other things do I have that I believe to be true, but maybe they're not universally true? And so that made me
Mm,
start to take a real look at the world, um, through a open-minded lens, because clearly I wasn't right about this. What else have I been wrong about? And so from my stages and travels and just interactions with people, I just would listen to hear their story. And uh, there was one particular guy. I played in downtown Nashville for 8 years, and I was just, the world would come into Nashville, and I would interact with them. And there was one guy that would come back around fairly regularly at the bar that I played at, and I noticed one night he was showing his phone to the bartender and the manager, and trying to condense this story. But as it turned out, he aspired to be a chef. He worked at McDonald's, but he aspired to be a chef, and he was showing off pictures of a dessert that he had made, and the bartender there and the managers were really lifting him up in that moment. And so I'm just kind of watching this take place, and I didn't know what was happening, so I asked whenever the whole scene was done, and they told me, and I said, "So you mean to tell me he just came in here and rolled over and got his belly scratched, and then went on about his way?" And they said, "Yeah, I guess that's what happened." And I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, if I took every dude I've ever known and every dog I've ever known, I bet you I could find a one-to-one personality match there. And that was kind of the first idea that I had towards there's an animal inside of us. And
Mm,
so that that led me kind of to start looking around on the internet to see what kind of information was out there. And um, it led me, I got ghosted by a girl that I was really interested in. And that I didn't believe that should happen either. So I've I finally texted her, and I said, "I know you're in a weird spot. If you get to a better spot in the future, feel free to holler at me then." And she immediately replied, "Thank you." And I thought, man, I've cracked this code. I must have cracked the code. So that led me again onto the internet to see if anybody else was having that same trouble. And that's where the rabbit hole began. I soaked up a whole bunch of information that led me to men's coaches. It led me to feminists, to psychology, to philosophy, to evolutionary biology, to the Bible and TED Talks. And I just started really assimilating this information. And then it was really evolutionary biology that really got me on the trail. And it just dawned on me that if I imagine myself through an animal lens, my behavior makes a lot more sense. And holy
mm.
crap, so does the rest of the world. And so I really started thinking about what does that actually mean? What does it mean that we are animals? And what is the animal trek through this life, through this world? And I realized that animals just have two jobs, and that's to survive and reproduce. We have five biological senses to interpret our surroundings, our environments. And most of us are just walking through life, through our environments, bumping into things and, chasing rewards and running from pain. And even when the even when our brain tells us we should do something, sometimes that thing is not the right thing to do. It doesn't feel the best, or it's scary or something like that. The reward we seek is on the other side, but we can't break through that fear to get to that reward because the
Yeah,
animal is going to go into avoid pain. The animal doesn't like to be afraid. And so I
yeah,
kind of, my goal was to separate the human from the animal and introduce them to each other because that's what happened for me. And the minute I realized that there were two factions in there, the human and the animal, and they were both fighting for time in the driver's seat, I started learning to be able to articulate how the animal felt versus just feeling it. I started being
yeah,
able to experience my own emotions and to be able to separate the two from the human and the animal, and started to be able to act a lot more in my own best interest
yeah,
and to renegotiate the damning behaviors that I had, the animal training, if you will. And it
yeah,
really
yeah,
started to bring about some precision in the way that I could navigate my life and the way that
yeah,
I could interact with others, and I could see their struggle and what their motivation was, and then I could go meet them where they were and
yeah,
help them come along.
yeah.
Um,
And you
that was
turn so
very. Go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
So you turn and so after you did this for yourself, you thought, okay, I'm gonna write a book, or like what was that like?
Well,
How did you go
immediately it
from
was, I started talking to my friends and family about it, and I was playing in downtown Nashville at this point extensively, and I had a real extended work family there, all the bartenders, all the other musicians, the security guys, and all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff. Not to mention the people that would come in, day in and day out and listen to music, and I would interact with those guys. And um, as you might imagine, in that environment, there's a lot of turmoil, especially in social lives and love lives, and people would still come to me wanting to help sort it out, and it would take me a while to give them the language that I wanted to be able to use, to take them
Mm,
from mile 0 to mile 15, so that we could start having
yeah.
the real conversation. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, man, maybe I need to write this down.
Mhm.
I had kind of daydreamed about writing a book when I was younger, but I never had anything
Yeah.
to say. And then, I was the musician, and I write songs. I don't write books, but I started thinking maybe I should
Yeah.
try to write this down. So
Yeah.
in late 2019, I was trying to calculate what is my slowest month of the year. Maybe I'll take that month off and focus on trying to write this down. And then, 3 months later, COVID happens and we get
Right.
shut down in Nashville. And I think,
Yeah.
well, I'm never going to have another opportunity like this, hopefully, at least hopefully. So let me try to take advantage of this, and let me turn this blessing into this curse into a blessing.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about how would I write it. And so I developed a few rules for myself. The first was I had to write it like I would speak it, because that
Hmm.
was my goal, to be able to speak it. I
Yeah.
had to keep it short enough that it wouldn't be a chore for folks to read. It wouldn't be insurmountable for the average person.
Yeah.
I had to use plain language. I had to use stories and examples and stuff. I didn't want to use any research terms, any scientific talk, because I wanted to keep it accessible to whoever needed it.
Yeah.
And
Wise.
a lot of folks that need this kind of perspective shift, they're in some sort of pain, they're in some sort of survival mode, and
Yeah.
they're not going to be interested in reading a bunch of scientific jargon. So it was important for me to talk it in plain language, and just with stories and examples from my own life and from the world that I've seen. And so once I kind of had those rules, I kind of sat down and what are the goals of it, to give the reader the language that we want to use to talk this thing out. And so I just started from, what is an animal?
Yeah.
What is their existence, their experience in this world? What are their jobs? What are their struggles? What are their fears? And how does that translate to us? And then what does it mean to be human? After what access do we have that the regular animal out there doesn't have? And there are
Yeah.
some higher functioning tools that the animal doesn't have at its disposal. Logic and reason, time in an abstract form, and morality and language is a big one. Animals don't have command of language. They communicate non-verbally with
Mhm.
sounds and signals and body language and that sort of thing. And if you think about it, most of our communication is nonverbal.
A lot
Um,
of it is.
and
Yes.
you can
It-
change the tone of the words that you say to give an entirely different message. And so I tried to lay it out to where we could see what an animal was, and then recognize our similarity with that animal, and then understand what the higher functioning tools are that only the human has access to. So
yeah.
that when
Absolutely.
we have these animal reactions, these emotional, these chemicals that flow through us to motivate these actions, the freeze, fly, or fight, those are the three levers for the animal. The human,
Hmm.
through logic and reason and those higher reaching tools, has more options. But
Hmm.
until we know that, we don't know it. It's hidden so much in plain sight that we can't necessarily see it. And so
Yeah.
my idea was just to illuminate that, to amplify the message that we are animals and humans, and they're both riding around in there. And if we can learn to facilitate communication between the two, we can have much more peace. We can understand why the animal is motivated to be mad at this or be sad about this, and we can have some agency on what to do about that, rather than being forced along our path by the energies and the emotions that we're given through our environment. We can have some
Yeah.
agency in designing that environment and choosing the way that we react to whatever given stimulus we encounter along our trek through our
Yeah.
life.
Yeah. Question: Did you talked about having stories in it, and you travel a lot. So are these like real stories? Names change? Like how did you pull your experience from traveling as a musician into kind of stories in the book?
There are there are tons of examples in there. A lot I tried to pull from my own life because I knew I
Mm,
had permission to talk about those.
yeah,
There are some other stories where names were left out.
yeah,
Just kind of more generalized, more summarized type of thing to get the
yeah,
point across, but not no intent to shame or embarrass anyone.
exactly.
There's a couple of chapters in there. The girl that I mentioned that I moved to Nashville with that ultimately broke my heart, and that pain was ultimately my teacher. um, she and I are actually still very good friends. Even
Good.
this has been 10 years ago now, 10 years plus, and we still are involved in each other's lives, and are a positive source for each other. But I got pretty raw with our relationship and the ending and the depression that I'd fallen into, and how I was able to dig myself out of that. Hopefully so that someone else that's in that same spot can use those same ideas and that perspective, the human animal perspective, to dig themselves out.
Yeah, I've
Because
definitely
what I
read books that they gave me a path forward, right? That's what you're
right,
talking about. So
that's exactly what
somebody
I'm
can
talking
read your
about.
book and they can say, "Okay, now I can see a path forward," right?
Right.
Yeah,
To gain some sort of agency over one's own emotions, one's own path in their life, to be able to design it rather than just wind up wherever it is you wind up.
yeah,
Because the winds of time are going to blow us around, and
yes, they are.
either we can find our steering mechanism of our own vessel and steer into the wind or steer out of the wind as we need to, or we're going to get blown around by those winds, and we're going to wind up in places that we didn't intend to wind up, and those places may be prosperous, or they may be painful.
Yeah,
And I just
places. Yeah,
want
you
to
don't
to shine this
necessarily.
light so that we can have some agency over where we steer.
Yeah, because you sometimes we end up in places we didn't actually mean to end up, and we didn't even want to be there, and then
Right.
we're there, and then it can be really hard to get out of those places. I wanted to ask about your music in the book, right? So
Okay.
you're a touring musician, and so you could have written songs about it. And I get why you wrote a book. It's like, yeah, you can't really, if somebody's struggling, you can't really, well, sit down and I'll sing you a song. But
Right. Right.
right? But is there an interplay between the book and the music you're writing right now?
There certainly is. I have a song in the pipeline right now called "Slip the Chain,"
Slip the
which
chain.
is slip the chain. And if you can imagine an animal being chained up in a yard, never
Yeah,
knowing beyond the fence, and the ability to slip out of that chain and see the world. Um, but like you said, it's if someone's struggling, music can be a therapeutic tool, and a lot of people use it that way. Um,
absolutely.
and that puts me in that position to have those conversations. For whatever reason, I've heard the naked truth about thousands of people at this point. I'm able to touch on their emotions and bring that out, and they want to share it with me. And at at one point, I was a little burdened by that, but then I realized that this is a gift. I get to know people on a far deeper level than the average person does.
Yeah, I
And
love people's
so
stories.
I do too. I do. I've always
Yeah,
been interested in it, and now I'm super interested in them. And
yeah,
I can hopefully, have that opportunity, that organic opportunity to share this light that I see.
yeah,
I try to
it's,
wait till I have permission from the universe to talk about it, but you'd be
yeah,
surprised how easily the universe gives that permission. So
yeah,
even I
exactly.
was on a plane just a couple days ago, and the two people I was sitting in between, we ended up having a human animal talk, and I was able to share some light with those guys. both
Amazing.
struggling in different ways, but I was
Yeah.
able to say, hey, I have this resource if you'd like it, feel free to
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah.
So
And talking about that, Leslie, I'm just going to say, connect with Leslie. So on Instagram, Human Animal Theory. Is it
right.
just about the book, or do you put your music on there as
That
well?
that one is just about the book
Just the book.
and
Okay.
ideas kind of surrounding it. I'm just in the process of building it. Stretched
Beautiful.
pretty thin
Okay.
these days, and so
That's
my
okay. Yeah.
personal Instagram that does have a little bit of music more about life is just Leslie Jackson Hall, Hall.
Okay. I'll get
Leslie
that
with
in
two
the.
E's.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
that's my personal Instagram there, a little more, full of
Yeah.
life, not just the book.
Perfect. Thank you. And as we wrap up, where do we find the book?
The book is on Amazon. I've also done a audio version. I read it myself. Actually, but there was a real synergy of skills there. I was able to record the entire audiobook by myself. I didn't have to hire any of that out. I did have a friend of mine, my good friend Steven, did the mastering on it to get the levels right where they needed to
Yeah.
be for Audible and stuff like that. But I
Yes.
was able to produce the whole thing just right there in my apartment in Nashville, Tennessee. So,
Yes. Well,
um,
I guess in the music world, you have the equipment you need to
right,
produce an audiobook, right? If
right,
I've never thought about that,
absolutely.
but there's a lot of crossover there. It's same
A lot of
equipment, the
crossover.
editing
There's a
skills, like
there's
there's
a lot of crossover between the music space and the book space that I was pleased to find. And at the end of the
yeah,
day, it's a product to be packaged, to be marketed. You know what I mean? And that's
yes.
a book or an album, whatever the case may be. So
Exactly. Well, thank you, Leslie, for coming.
you're very welcome.
So, the human animal theory on Instagram is all about the
Right.
book. Leslie Hall on Instagram is all about Leslie and his music.
Yeah,
Pardon
Leslie
me.
Jackson Hall.
Sorry, Leslie. Pardon me, Leslie Jackson Hall.
Right.
I will make sure that is in the description, and I will also grab a link for the. Oh, do you have a website, Leslie?
Not yet. Working on it.
Okay. Okay. Working on it. When you have it, let me know and I'll pop that in the description
Okay.
as well. Perfect. Thank you so much for coming, Leslie. I've
Yeah.
really
Thanks for having me.
enjoyed chatting with you. It's been so much fun.
Yeah.
Um,
Likewise.
and thank you to everyone else out there for joining us today on Author Nation Interviews. I hope this conversation has been inspiring and fun because I've really enjoyed it. Uh,
Same.
Good. Remember to visit authornation.online to find the resources you need to be a nonfiction author. And we always want your feedback and we always want your support. So if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a comment, leaving a review, and don't forget to share it with somebody who needs to be inspired to write the book that they have. They've had that light bulb moment in their life after a lot of research and just as Leslie does, seeing the world in a very raw form, which I think is an amazing way to gather information, to take that raw form of life and commingle it with research, as Leslie's been talking about. I think that's amazing. So keep writing, keep creating, and continue to share your unique stories with the world.